Millions of cameras tracking every person's move, and a department of pre-crime harassing citizens for innocent behavior. A shocking look at the modern police state of communist China and how the church is coping.
Plus, the Daughters of Kobani, how a band of women warriors fought on the front lines in the war against ISIS and became the enemy the terrorists feared the most.
And anger in America. Boy, oh boy, it is way off the charts. Why are we so mad and becoming madder? And what's the antidote to all this rage? Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. Well, in China, Big Brother is real. More than 415 million surveillance cameras track the population 24/7.
Let's add to that digital currency, social security cards, and monitored smartphones. And what you have is what's being called the perfect police state. Take a look. In 2013, China's President Xi Jinping said that whoever controls data has the upper hand. Ever since, Xi has been on a technological quest to build what some call a blueprint for a digital dictatorship. It would not only allow China's communist government to control huge volumes of data on its own citizens, but also of those around the world. Dustin Carmack worked as chief of staff for the Director of National Intelligence.
You're talking, vast amounts of data. They are running between both either covert or overt, cyber attacks and other realms. They are sucking up massive amounts of data around the globe that could have nefarious purposes in the long run.
China has more than 415 million surveillance cameras deployed throughout the country, making its population by far the world's most watched. And now Beijing is using digital currency, social security cards, social credit systems, and online interactions to keep an even closer eye on its citizens.
It is a massive dragnet based on artificial intelligence, facial recognition, voice recognition. These are all novel technologies that the Chinese Communist Party is deploying against its people.
Jeffrey Kane, author of the new book, The Perfect Police State, an undercover odyssey into China's terrifying surveillance dystopia of the future, says the regime first tested this type of surveillance several years ago to monitor Uyghurs, an ethnic Muslim group living in the western part of the country.
It's a place where everything they do from morning to night, from the moment that they eat breakfast or go to the market or go to work, everything is monitored by their smartphones, by government cameras everywhere. There are millions of government cameras in this region. And nothing is private, nothing is secret. Your entire life is exposed.
Kane says his investigation found that those reams of data are fed to a massive police database, and with the help of artificial intelligence, attempts to predict whether or not someone will commit a crime in the future.
But the thing is that the system has gotten out of control because, so I looked at a list of reasons that people can be detained for these pre-crimes. It could be something as simple as, they bought a tent suddenly, or they stopped smoking suddenly. They change their behavior in ways that the system finds odd. And then so it nudges the police. It sends the police a little, on the app, a nudge to, go to this person's house, to their work, to check them out, maybe interrogate them a little bit. And if the situation calls for it, take them away to one of many hundreds of concentration camps.
China is accused of committing genocide against the Uyghurs by holding more than 1 million of them in what Beijing calls re-education camps. The Associated Press gaining exclusive access to one such detention center this summer that allegedly had room enough to hold more than 10,000 prisoners.
When we talk about genocide, it's not just about taking lives, which there's evidence to suggest that's occurring too, but it's to erase a population, an ethnic group, and that's what they're after.
Sophie Richardson with Human Rights Watch says President Xi also wants China to be the global leader in exporting its authoritarian surveillance tech to other like-minded regimes.
So when they've got the kinds of tools that allow them, for example, to track their critics every movement and control their access, for example, to money or even to buying plane or train tickets, it can make a state exponentially more powerful.
New research from Oxford University and Berlin's Humboldt University uncovered some 1,800 active Chinese surveillance devices across 72 countries, including Venezuela, Kenya, Philippines, and Oman.
China is now using their influence, their money, their technology to facilitate the repression of minorities and individuals in other countries.
China has also deployed censorship devices in 17 other countries, among them Turkey, Cuba, Egypt, and Pakistan, where news and media websites are blocked.
I think the overall effect is to use technology to engineer a very particular kind of dissent-free society, and that's a very frightening concept.
China used these and other tactics to suppress protesters in Hong Kong, then came to Cuba's aid in July by cutting communications after tens of thousands took to the streets protesting the regime.
That type of technology being used to throttle internet traffic flows, or at times in Cuba actually turn off the internet, especially in the early days of some of the protests down there.
Meanwhile, new research shows that technology made by 7 American companies, including IBM, Microsoft, and Oracle, are facilitating China's surveillance of Uyghur Muslims with little to no consequences.
I think that a lot of American companies have been caught with their pants down, frankly, because they spent the past 2 decades warming up to China, looking for market and business opportunities, profit opportunities, and now they've realized that they're making a deal with the devil.
Wow. So, George, how is this technology being used against Christians in China?
I mean, next to the Uyghurs, the Christians are, in the minds of the Beijing government, the most dangerous group, because there's millions of them who have sworn allegiance not to Xi Jinping and the Communist Party, but to Jesus Christ, their personal savior. And that scares the bejeebies out of the Communist Party. And so what they're doing is they're using this very same technology against the Uyghurs. They're using it against the Christians to monitor, to ensure that churches have surveillance technology, to make sure that Christian leaders are being monitored. So they're using this very same high-tech, novel new technology to track Christians as well. Scary stuff to an unbelievable level that we're seeing today.
So, George, is this stopping the church in China at all from spreading the gospel or meeting?
Absolutely not. You know, because this is a country and a people group that have experienced 70 years of persecution. The persecution 70 years ago was worse than it is today. Pastors were arrested, they were tortured, they were hung, they were executed. So they have endured persecution. But today's persecution is different, and it involves technology. So they are finding, I'm not going to tell you how, but they're finding, creative ways to try and circumnavigate these various high-tech technologies. But at the same time, look, people are looking for hope. All this technology, all this surveillance is one thing, but at the end of the day, there is this aching in mankind's heart, and it is piercing the hearts of millions of Chinese believers around in that country, and they want this message of good news, and nothing will stop the furtherance of the kingdom of God and the message that Jesus Christ loves them. Never, nothing.
Amen.
Not technology.
Preach, brother.
Come on now.
All right. Wow. Okay, up next, the fighting force feared by ISIS. How this band of female fighters took the fight to the terrorists.
Folks, welcome back to Christian World News. They are known as the women who helped save their city from ISIS.
In 2014, a female Kurdish militia in the town of Kobani handed the Islamic State its first real defeat, helping drive the terrorists out of northern Syria. They're known as the Daughters of Kobani. In 2014, the Islamic State had swept across much of Syria, overtaking cities and spreading terror as civil war raged all around it. As ISIS approached a town called Kobani, a group of Kurdish female fighters, armed with AK-47s and a lot of courage, were determined not to let ISIS take their town, their homes, or their families. Although they had braided hair and painted fingernails, when it came to fighting ISIS, they were as fierce as any male army.
They weren't just fighting ISIS, but they were leading in battle, leading men and women in the fight against the extremists of the Islamic State.
In her book, The Daughters of Kobani, author Gail Samak Lamon introduces us to these women, including Azima, a sniper determined to stop ISIS at all costs.
Even when so many people had lost faith that Kobani would not fall, she would absolutely tell everybody, including her fighters and including her sister, who sometimes called while she was in the middle of battle, literally taking fire from the Islamic State. She would say, we will not lose Kobani. We will fight until the end and we'll win.
Was ISIS afraid of these female fighters?
Yes, you asked me about Azima. Azima had a great story about how, at the beginning, she would hear on the walkie-talkies the men from ISIS say, try to pick off the women, try to kill the women first. And then at the end, when they saw what good snipers they were, they would be on the radio saying, hey, don't get too close to those women snipers. They're very good. And they took that as a huge compliment. And there was also the fact that their men of the Islamic State felt they couldn't go to paradise if they were killed by a woman. And they would get on the radio and really say terrible things to these women, who then used it as motivation to power them in their fight against ISIS.
Lamont's research into the Women's Protection Forces took her to the front lines, where she also spent time with Christian female fighters.
And, one young woman from a Christian family told me that her mother at first did not approve of her joining the all-women's force. And then, ISIS by then had kidnapped Christians in the Habor Valley. And when her parents would go to church, people would come up to them and say, we're so proud of what your daughter is doing. And I really hope that the Daughters of Kobani does justice to the courage, bravery, the power of these young women.
The battle for Kobani was considered a turning point in the war against the Islamic State. How big a role did this female militia play in freeing Kobani from the grip of ISIS?
Women were front and center in the fight to stop the Islamic State. And in Kobani, this was their first battlefield defeat. And women played a central role in handing it to them.
Lamont says their battle skills earned the respect of U.S. Special Forces fighting alongside them.
And there's a story of one man who said, when I saw how many young women, ponytails and AK-47s going off to fight ISIS, I thought, wow, this is definitely a first for me. They are real and true warriors.
For many of these women, this was not just about defeating ISIS, although that was their major focus, but giving women more equality in the Middle East. Do you think they achieved that goal?
There is no question that the next generation of girls born will see women protecting them in that part of Syria and in that part of the region. And there's a story that's in the book when they finally clear the town of Manbij of the Islamic State. A woman comes out and sort of puts her hands on the faces of the young women and said, we didn't even know you were real. We heard about you, but we didn't know you were real. And I think that's the power of seeing what women can be.
About Azima, she was injured not once, but twice. Pretty badly the second time. Whatever happened to her?
One of the most beautiful moments of reporting this was when she was telling me about this moment when she's injured the second time by the Islamic State. And you want to talk about force of will. She's sitting there and she says, I will not die because that will be a gift to them.
Wow.
I will be here to see my people through to victory. And so she's on the radio with her fighters saying, listen, show the men who bought and sold women what we are capable of, and know that even if we fight and die, we will have died for something that matters.
Still love that story so much. Well, if you'd like to learn more about the Daughters of Kobani, visit our website at cbnnews.com. George?
Excellent story. Coming up, folks, anger in America could be described as an epidemic. So, is there a solution to our heated emotions? We take a look when Christian World News returns.
Welcome back. America is seething. From politics to the pandemic, people are boiling mad, George.
Yeah, they sure are. So how can we lower the temperature so cooler heads can prevail? Well, John Jessup talked to a radio host with an unorthodox prescription. Try that one.
Major road rage action happening here.
On the road. Off the field. Young. And old. Anger seems to dominate the current mood.
Anger as an emotion actually has a lot of value.
While psychologists say it's a natural response designed to help us fast-track problem solving,
It feels good because you feel like you're more likely to succeed. That also relates to some of the things that anger does. It makes you, again, more confident in that you will succeed in attaining your goal.
excessive anger can cause emotional and physical harm, leading to heart disease, lung damage, and even shortened lifespans. Not to mention how it can ruin relationships.
There's no way to live, and it actually is terrible for your health.
Grant Hansen, a nationally syndicated radio host,
Some good broadcasting is on the way.
wrote the book Unoffendable in 2015, tackling the issue of anger gone wild.
You might be considered a prophet somewhat, considering that these are the dominant themes playing out today. So, Grant, why'd you write the book?
I couldn't figure out how long I was supposed to be angry about stuff.
Like letting go of childhood trauma and bitterness after growing up in a broken home. The son of a preacher, his search led him to the Bible and what he believes is the antidote.
The answer keeps coming back. We're not supposed to stay angry at all. We're supposed to let it go. We're supposed to forgive people.
Hansen makes the case anger is a choice, writing, "We can and should choose to forfeit our right to be offended." It's an idea he acknowledges sounds radical, but he says it's modeled on the life and words of Christ.
I'm not telling you that. Jesus is telling us we have to forgive people. Paul's the one who said, let go of your anger before the sun goes down. Get rid of all anger. James is the one that writes, there's nothing righteous about human anger. You can find that in James 1.
Ryan Edwards, a Christian counselor and a minister of marriage and family, agrees, quoting a familiar passage about anger.
Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, right? So I find myself in my marriage counseling often bringing up this verse because during marital adjustment sessions, what ends up happening with couples is sometimes they'll let this anger and frustration go on to the next day.
The key, according to both, is forgiveness and sacrifice.
I myself am a sinner, so I have to decide, am I going to let things go or not? And the Bible is not ambiguous about this. We're supposed to let go of offense, cover sin with our love. We're supposed to forgive so that we'll be forgiven.
Pastor Edwards adds, it's also good to be humble and reflect on our own failings.
Search me, O God, and know my thoughts. See if there's any wicked way in me and lead me into the way everlasting. So there's this idea on a regular basis of being introspective and asking God, hey, check me, because I want to live a life that honors you, so I need to be checked. So Jesus cleansed the temple, but God wants us to cleanse our temple.
That is not what America is about!
But what about political causes and conflicting worldviews? He points out many of the same issues existed in Jesus' day.
Infanticide, racism, occupation, injustice, like all of this. There's nothing new. And yet, look at his approach to humanity and the fact that he still wanted to save it. He still loved us. You can still advocate, give, donate, act, be an activist on whatever your issue is. But if you do it out of anger, that's not the right motivation. It actually clouds your judgment.
In fact, according to a recent study by psychology professor Michael Greenstein, people are more susceptible to misinformation when they're angry, raising their confidence while reducing the memory's accuracy.
With fast-paced information gathering, it's really hard already to know what is the quote truth. And if you're experiencing anger about something, you might be more likely to just go and search for information that shows that you're right. And then you believe that you're right. And so it creates this kind of cycle of I'm angry.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about forgiving those who sin against you.
Hansen admits writing a book on anger doesn't mean he's mastered it, though he says being unoffendable and letting go of anger has clear rewards.
So the weird thing is it actually makes life a lot better. And I think it helps us to see things more clearly, too. And the last thing is it makes us very different from the rest of the world.
A relevant and timely remedy. John Jessup, CBN News.
Great encouragement. I've known you 20 years, and we've been best friends, and I've never been angry at you. Actually, neither have you.
Aw, hug.
Folks, we'll be back right after this.
One of Jerusalem's most iconic buildings is getting a major facelift, and it's shedding light on more than 2,000 years ago.
Well, our good friend Emily Jones brings us that story and much more from Jerusalem. Take a look.
Welcome to Inside Israel, where we show you what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. Israel is pushing back against the United States' efforts to reopen a Palestinian consulate in Jerusalem. For years, this building served as Washington's de facto embassy to the Palestinians until it was closed by the Trump administration and transferred under the authority of the official U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. President Biden wants to reopen the consulate to repair ties with the Palestinians and needs Israel's consent to do so. But Israel says no.
There's so much more we agree upon with our American friends than we disagree upon, but indeed, our position is, and it was presented very clearly and openly to our American friends, that there's no room for another American consulate in Jerusalem.
Israel sees the reopening of the consulate as a challenge to its sovereignty, but Palestinians view it as a sign of hope for a future state. A restoration project at the Tower of David Museum in Jerusalem is breathing new life into the ancient city. The museum, located in the iconic Tower of David Citadel, contains archaeological finds dating back to the time of Jesus and beyond, like this pottery shard from a bowl dating back to King Hezekiah in the First Temple period. Meanwhile, architects are modernizing the museum.
It's really one of the most exciting projects an architect can hope for. To work in such a, in this inside history, and give a new, let's say, a new life to this history, and make it accessible for everybody.
They recently broke ground on a new pavilion and welcome center, and hope to see tourists there one day soon. Israel and the United Arab Emirates are going to the moon together. The two countries signed an agreement to collaborate on space missions, including Israel's second attempt to land on the moon with its Bereshit 2 spacecraft. Israel tried to reach the moon in 2019 with Bereshit 1, but it accidentally crashed into the surface of the moon and was destroyed. This space collaboration was made possible through the Abraham Accords and the blossoming ties between the two countries. For more stories like this, you can watch Jerusalem Dateline at cbnnews.com.
Thank you, Emily. Well, folks, that's it for this week's edition of Christian World News.
What a great show.
Terrific.
And I've never been mad at you either. You just got to let it go.
That's right.
You got to let it go, right?
All the time.
Well, until next week, from all of us here, goodbye and God bless you.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to our CBN Europe YouTube channel or click on the video on the right for more content. Click the link below to go to our website.